Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of the International Space Station's new xenological wing, watching the sleek silver vessel of the Valkyrie delegation dock with practiced precision. After 6 months of careful communication and preparation, humanity's first official diplomatic meeting with an advanced alien civilization was about to begin. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The Valkyrie had appeared in Earth's orbit with their massive ships that seemed to bend light around them, broadcasting peace in every human language simultaneously. Their initial message had been simple: Earth was not alone, and they represented something called the Galactic Confederation. Now, after months of digital communication and careful protocol establishment, they were finally meeting face to face. "Dr. Chen, they're ready for you in the airlock." Commander Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. "Remember the protocols." Sarah smoothed down her regulation uniform and made her way to the airlock. As the ranking xenobiologist on the station, she would be among the first humans to directly interact with the aliens. The airlock cycled, and she found herself facing 3 beings that defied her expectations. The Valkyrie were tall, willowy creatures with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors with their movements. Their 4 eyes blinked in alternating patterns, and what appeared to be gill-like structures on their necks fluttered gently. But what struck Sarah most was their obvious discomfort. They moved with careful, deliberate motions, as if straining against something. "Greetings, Dr. Chen," the central figure spoke, its translator converting musical tones into crisp English. "I am first speaker Nelax. We apologize for our apparent distress. Your station's gravity is quite intense for us." Sarah's scientific mind whirred into action. "We can adjust the artificial gravity in this section," she offered quickly. "We had no idea it would cause you discomfort." "That would be most appreciated," Nelax responded, relief evident in their tone. "We should have anticipated this. After all, you do come from a Deathworld." The term hung in the air like a physical thing. Sarah had heard it in their previous communications, but had never understood its full implications until now. "A Deathworld?" she asked carefully. "Yes," another Valkyrie spoke up, introducing themselves as Science Director Vex. "Your Earth is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. The gravity alone would crush most spacefaring species. The atmospheric pressure, the temperature variations, the bacterial load. It is remarkable that you not only survived but thrived." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Everything they took for granted, Earth's gravity, its weather, its very atmosphere, was apparently lethal to most intelligent life in the galaxy. No wonder the Valkyrie moved so carefully. The gravity adjusted, and the aliens visibly relaxed. But Sarah noticed they maintained a careful distance from her, their movements still cautious despite their more comfortable environment. "We have reviewed your species application to join the Confederation," Nelax continued. "It is unprecedented. Never before have we encountered a species from such an extreme environment seeking membership. Is that a problem?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice neutral. "It is a concern," Nelax admitted. "Your physical capabilities alone are disturbing to many member species. A human child could accidentally kill a Valkyrie adult with a friendly embrace. Your endurance, your ability to heal from injuries, your resistance to toxins, these are traits our people associate with apex predators, not civilized beings." Sarah felt a surge of defensiveness but kept it in check. "Yet we are here, peacefully seeking diplomatic relations. Surely that counts for something." "It does," Vex interjected. "But you must understand, your very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the development of intelligent life. How could a species evolve intelligence while maintaining such physical advantages?" The implications were clear. The Confederation saw humans as something impossible, thinking predators, civilized monsters. Sarah chose her next words carefully. "Perhaps that's exactly why we should join the Confederation," she suggested. "We could learn from each other. You have technologies and knowledge we can only dream of, and we could help protect the Confederation." not as warriors, but as guardians. The Valkyrie exchanged looks, their skin shifting through patterns of color that Sarah suspected represented their emotional state. Finally, Nelak spoke again. An interesting proposal, Dr. Chen. But tell me, your species has a long history of warfare. How can you claim to be peaceful when your own history speaks otherwise? Sarah smiled, remembering the turning point that had come 3 weeks ago. The swarm had attacked a mining colony in the Orient sector, expecting to find the usual rigid Confederation defense formations. Instead, they'd encountered a mixed human-alien fleet operating on human principles. The battle had been unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Confederation ships, traditionally built for power and durability, had been retrofitted with human-designed systems that emphasized flexibility and unpredictability. Each captain, trained in human tactical doctrine, fought as an individual within a greater whole. The swarm had retreated for the first time since the war began. "There's something else," Sarah said, activating her own display. "We've been analyzing the swarm's behavior patterns. They're showing signs of frustration." The room fell silent. The idea that the swarm could feel frustration was revolutionary. They had always been viewed as a mindless, consuming force. "Explain," Kex demanded. "They're making mistakes." Helena picked up the thread. "Tactical errors we haven't seen before. They're trying to adapt to our methods, but they can't because there's nothing consistent to adapt to. It's affecting their decision-making." Sarah brought up footage from recent battles. "Look here and here. They're attacking aggressively when they should be defensive. They're committing too many resources to small engagements. They're behaving emotionally. Which means they can be demoralized," Helena concluded. "We're not just fighting their bodies, we're fighting their minds." The revelation sparked a new phase in the war. Human psychological warfare specialists were integrated into every fleet. They didn't just study how to fight the swarm. They studied how to confuse them, frustrate them, make them doubt. The breakthrough came during the Battle of Proxima Delta. The swarm, already frustrated by their inability to predict human-led fleet movements, encountered something new, ships that appeared to be in multiple places at once. "Quantum ghost projectors," Helena explained to the astonished council. "Based on technology we developed for deep space rescue operations. We're not trying to trick their sensors. We're making them question their own perception of reality." The swarm's response was dramatic. Their formerly coordinated attacks became erratic. Their adaptive capabilities, once their greatest strength, began to work against them as they tried to counter attacks that weren't real while missing genuine threats. "This isn't what we expected when we joined the Confederation," Sarah admitted during a quiet moment with Helena. They stood in the observation dome of the new Joint Command Station, watching ships train in the distance. "We thought we'd have to prove we weren't dangerous." Helena laughed softly. "Instead, we proved that being dangerous isn't the same as being violent. We showed them that strength can protect, that survival instincts can preserve life instead of taking it." Below them, a group of alien cadets was learning human hand-to-hand combat techniques, not to fight, but to understand their own bodies better, to move more efficiently in space, to help others in emergencies. "We're teaching them how to survive," Sarah observed. "No," Helena corrected, echoing her words from months ago. "We're teaching them how to protect. And that's making all of us stronger." The war wasn't over. The swarm was still a threat, still evolving, still dangerous. But for the first time, the Confederation wasn't just fighting back. They were protecting, preserving, and growing stronger together. Humanity had proven that being from a death world didn't make them warriors. It made them perfect guardians for a galaxy that needed protection. 5 years after first contact, the Confederation gathered for what would become known as the Day of Understanding. The Great Assembly Chamber on Nexus Prime had been redesigned, no longer arranged in hierarchical tiers, but in a circular pattern that emphasized equality and cooperation. At its center stood Dr. Sarah Chen and Admiral Helena Torres, preparing to address representatives from over 200 species. The swarm's final attack had come 3 weeks earlier. Their once mighty fleet, confused and demoralized by human tactics, had launched a desperate assault on Earth itself. They had expected to find a weakened homeworld, its defenses stretched thin protecting the Confederation. Instead, they found something unprecedented. A unified defense force of humans and aliens working in perfect harmony. Ships of all species moved with human fluidity, crews mixed and matched for maximum effectiveness. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. They didn't just retreat this time, Helena said, addressing the assembly. They tried to communicate. The assembly chamber felt different when Sarah returned. Fear had given way to desperation. The tactical displays showed 3 more systems had gone dark during their brief recess. High Speaker Venix was concluding their address. And so we must accept that our current strategies are failing. The swarm adapts too quickly to our conventional weapons. We need alternatives. Sarah felt every eye in the chamber turn toward the human section. She stood, her voice clear in the hushed space. The United Earth Defense Council has a proposal, she began. We've been developing defensive technologies since we joined the Confederation. Not weapons of war, but tools of protection. We call it Project Guardian. The chamber erupted in overlapping translations and exclamations. Sarah waited for quiet before continuing. We understand your fears. Humans come from a world that shaped us to be strong, to be resilient. You see these traits and think warrior, but strength can protect as well as harm. Resilience can defend as well as endure. She activated her own holographic display, showing the Guardian ships. They were unlike anything in the Confederation fleet, smaller, more maneuverable, designed to operate in groups rather than as massive single units. We don't seek to fight your war, Sarah continued. We seek to protect our shared civilization. The swarm adapts to defeat. We'll adapt faster. They learn from every encounter. So will we. Not because we're warriors, but because we're survivors. And survivors protect their own. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Venix spoke again, their thoughts tinged with a new emotion. Hope. Perhaps, they transmitted, we have been wrong about humans all along. Tell us more about Project Guardian, Dr. Chen. Tell us how survivors might teach us to endure. Sarah smiled, thinking of Helena's words. The time had come sooner than expected, but humanity was ready. They would show the Confederation that the strength to survive went hand in hand with the wisdom to protect. The real test was just beginning. The Nexus swarm struck the core systems with devastating precision. No one had expected them to bypass the middle colonies. It defied all strategic logic. But as Sarah Chen watched the emergency broadcasts from the observation deck of the Guardian fleet's flagship Terra Dawn, she realized that was exactly why they'd done it. They're not just adapting tactically, she muttered, watching the holographic displays track the swarm's movements. They're adapting culturally. Admiral Helena Torres stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the same feeds. They learned that the Confederation expects enemies to behave according to their strategic doctrines, so they didn't. The massive screens showed the fall of Centauri Prime, one of the Confederation's oldest colony worlds. The swarm's ships had evolved again, now capable of phasing through traditional energy shields as if they weren't there. The defending fleet, comprised of the Confederation's most advanced vessels, was being systematically torn apart. Message from High Command, Lieutenant Park announced from his communications station. They're ordering a full retreat from the Centauri sector. Helena's jaw tightened. They're abandoning 3 billion civilians. Sarah felt sick. The Confederation's military doctrine prioritized preserving fleet strength over holding ground. It made sense when fighting conventional enemies, but the swarm didn't leave survivors to rescue later. Admiral, Sarah said quietly, it's time. Helena nodded slowly. Send the signal. All Guardian vessels, prepare for immediate deployment. Authorization code, humanity first. The bridge erupted into activity. Sarah felt the subtle shift as the Pterodon's engines powered up. Around them, 40 other Guardian ships, smaller, faster, and more adaptable than anything in the Confederation fleet, moved into formation. "The Confederation Council is ordering us to stand down," Park reported, his voice tense. "They're saying any unauthorized military action will be considered an act of war." Helena smiled grimly. "Send them my response. We are not warriors. We are protectors, and we will not abandon those who need protection." The Guardian fleet jumped into hyperspace, emerging directly in the midst of the chaos around Centauri Prime. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw the swarm ships up close for the first time. They were beautiful in their horror, organic shapes that seemed to flow like liquid metal, weapons that grew and evolved even as she watched. "All ships, execute Operation Prometheus," Helena commanded. "Remember your training. We're not here to fight a war. We're here to save lives." The Guardian ships moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Where Confederation vessels fought in rigid formations, the human ships flowed like water, adapting their tactics moment by moment. They struck not to destroy, but to distract and defend. "Evacuation ships, you have your corridors," Helena announced on all channels. "Get those people out. We'll keep the swarm busy." The swarm, for the first time, seemed confused. Their attacks, evolved to counter Confederation tactics, found no purchase against the seemingly chaotic movements of the human vessels. When they adapted to target one ship's defense systems, they found the next used something completely different. "They can't predict us," Sarah realized, watching the tactical displays. "Every human ship captain is fighting differently, thinking independently. The swarm can't adapt to what it can't pattern." For 6 hours, the Guardian fleet danced with death. They lost ships. The swarm was still lethal, still powerful. But for every human vessel destroyed, thousands of civilians made it to safety. The evacuation ships, protected by the Guardian fleet's unpredictable defense, worked methodically to save as many as they could. When it was over, when the last evacuation ship jumped to safety, Helena gave the order to retreat. The Guardian fleet had lost 11 ships and their crews, heroes who had given their lives not in conquest, but in protection. They returned to Confederation space to find the political landscape transformed. The footage of human ships sacrificing themselves to save Confederation civilians had gone viral across every world. The council chambers, which had once rung with fears about human aggression, now echoed with calls for closer cooperation. "They're calling us heroes," Sarah said quietly, standing in Helena's office after the debriefing. "They don't understand that this is just who we are." Helena nodded, looking out at the stars. Perhaps that's what they needed to see. Not our strength, not our technology, but our heart. We had the power to fight, but we chose to protect. "The swarm is still out there," Sarah reminded her. "They'll adapt to this too." "Yes," Helena agreed. "But now we won't face them alone. The Confederation finally sees us for what we are, not warriors, but guardians. And together, we might just be strong enough to survive." A message flashed on Helena's desk. The Confederation Council was requesting an emergency session to formally integrate the Guardian fleet into their defense structure. But more importantly, they wanted to understand how humans had developed such effective protective strategies. "Shall we tell them?" Sarah asked with a slight smile. Helena stood. "We'll tell them everything. About how Earth's harsh conditions taught us not just to be strong, but to be clever. About how our history of conflict taught us the true value of peace. About how being surrounded by death made us experts at preserving life. We'll teach them to be survivors," Sarah concluded. "No," Helena corrected gently. "We'll teach them to be protectors." The integration of human tactics into the Confederation's defense strategy didn't happen smoothly. In the months following the Centauri Prime evacuation, Sarah Chen found herself spending more time teaching xenopsychology than practicing xenobiology. The concept of controlled chaos, a cornerstone of human military doctrine, was particularly difficult for many species to grasp. But how can you coordinate if every ship acts independently? Demanded war strategist Kex, their crystalline form pulsing with frustrated colors. The Confederation's war room, now a joint human-alien command center, was filled with similar debates. Admiral Torres, who had been appointed as humanity's representative to the Joint Defense Council, answered with characteristic patience. "We don't coordinate. We cooperate. There's a difference." Sarah watched as Helena pulled up a holographic display of Earth's oceans. "Look at how schools of fish move when attacked by a predator. Each fish makes its own decisions, but they work together instinctively. That's what we do." The display shifted to show footage from the latest engagement with the swarm. The Guardian fleet, now tripled in size with the addition of Confederation volunteers, moved with the same fluid grace that had saved Centauri Prime. But now alien ships were beginning to adopt similar patterns, creating what humans called organized chaos. "The swarm adapts to patterns," Sarah added, stepping forward. "So we don't give them patterns to adapt to. Every ship, every captain, thinks independently while working toward a common goal." "But the casualties," another strategist began. "Are lower than ever," Helena interrupted, bringing up the statistics. "We've reduced fleet losses by 60% since implementing these tactics. More importantly, civilian evacuation success rates have increased by 80%. Sarah smiled sadly. "Because we learned from that history. We fought because we were afraid, because we didn't understand each other. But we grew past that. We're not warriors, we're survivors. And survivors understand the value of peace better than anyone." The meeting continued for hours, discussing everything from human biology to Earth's ecosystem. But Sarah could see that her words had made an impact. The Valkyries' initial fear had given way to cautious curiosity. As they prepared to leave, Nalax pulled Sarah aside. "Your words were wise, Dr. Chen. But I must warn you, not all in the Confederation will be as willing to listen. Some will see you only as threats." Sarah nodded. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Not with force, but with patience, understanding, and diplomacy. After all, that's what truly civilized beings do, isn't it?" The Valkyrie's skin shifted to a deep blue that Sarah hadn't seen before. "Indeed, Dr. Chen, indeed." As she watched their ship depart, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger galaxy, but they would have to tread carefully. They would have to prove that being strong didn't mean being dangerous, that being capable of violence didn't make them violent. They would have to prove that they weren't warriors. They were something far more important. They were protectors. 3 years after first contact, the Confederation's Central Assembly on Nexus Prime buzzed with an energy that made the hair on the back of Sarah Chen's neck stand up. Now Earth's senior xenological advisor, she sat in the human observation section, watching the emergency session unfold. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate over 200 species, was filled to capacity. High Speaker Venix, a crystalline being who transmitted thoughts directly into the minds of their audience, took the central platform. The message that followed sent chills through the assembly. "The Nexus swarm has breached the outer rim defenses." Venix's thoughts resonated. 3 colony worlds have gone dark. Our worst fears are realized. They are not merely raiding. This is an invasion. Holographic displays materialized, showing massive organic ships that seemed to devour everything in their path. The swarm moved like a living storm through space, leaving nothing but debris and death in their wake. Sarah felt her tablet vibrate. A message from Admiral Helena Torres back on Earth. "Are you seeing this? How bad is it?" She typed back quickly. "Worse than we imagined. The Confederation is panicking." The next few hours were a blur of tactical assessments and devastating reports. The swarm's biological technology was unlike anything the Confederation had encountered. Their ships could repair themselves, adapt to weapons, and worst of all, they learned from every defeat, becoming stronger. When the Security Council convened, Sarah wasn't surprised to find herself politely but firmly asked to leave. Despite 3 years of membership, humans were still viewed with suspicion by many in the Confederation. Their strength, their resilience, their adaptability, the very things that helped them survive Earth were seen as marks of a dangerous species. But Sarah had learned to be patient. She made her way to her private office in the human embassy, where a secure quantum link connected her directly to the United Earth Defense Council. Admiral Torres's hologram appeared, her expression grim. "Give me the real situation, Sarah. No diplomatic filters." "They're scared, Helena. The swarm isn't just winning. They're evolving. Each engagement makes them stronger. The Confederation's weapons are becoming less effective with each battle, and they still won't accept our help." Sarah shook her head. "They're treating us like barely contained weapons. They'll accept our resources, our raw materials, but they won't let human ships join the defense fleet. They're afraid of what we might do with access to their military technology." Helena's hologram flickered as she paced. "They don't understand. We've been preparing for this since first contact. Project Guardian isn't about weapons. It's about survival." Sarah leaned forward. "Tell me we're ready. The ships are built. The crews are trained. We've developed everything in-house, using only human technology. No Confederation treaties violated." Helena's smile was fierce. "And we got something they haven't thought of. Innovation born from limitation." A soft chime interrupted them. Sarah was being summoned back to the assembly. But before she left, Helena caught her attention one last time. "Sarah, when the time comes, and it will come, make them understand. We're not warriors. We're protectors. Everything we've built, everything we've prepared for, it's not about fighting. It's about preserving life." The chamber filled with murmurs as Sarah stepped forward, activating a holographic display. "The swarm, it turns out, is not mindless. They're survivors, like us. Their aggression came from fear. Fear of a galaxy they didn't understand. Fear of species they couldn't predict." The display showed the first translated messages from the swarm. They were not demands or threats, but questions. Why did the defenders fight differently? How did they maintain unity without uniformity? What was this power that made them stronger by making them less predictable? "We offered them something they'd never encountered before," Sarah continued. "Not surrender, not destruction, but understanding. We invited them to learn, to grow, to become part of something greater than themselves." The assembly watched in amazement as the next images appeared. The first swarm diplomatic vessels, their organic technology already beginning to shift from weapons of war to tools of exploration. Their rapid adaptation, once used for combat, was being redirected toward peaceful cooperation. Some asked how we knew this would work. Helena added, "The truth is, we didn't. We simply did what humans have always done. We survived by adapting, and we protected others while doing so." A swarm representative rose from their newly appointed seat in the assembly. Their crystalline organic form shimmered with colors that the Confederation's xenobiologists were just beginning to understand. "We came to consume." The swarm diplomat's thoughts resonated through the chamber. "Instead, we learned. Your strength was not in your weapons or your tactics. It was in your ability to change, to grow, to protect. We wish to learn this strength." Sarah smiled, remembering that first meeting with the Valkyrie years ago. "The Confederation feared us because we came from a death world. They thought our strength made us warriors. The swarm feared us because we were unpredictable. They thought our adaptability made us dangerous. Both were wrong," Helena concluded. "Our strength and our adaptability came from the same source, our deep-rooted need to protect life in all its forms. We're not warriors. We're not conquerors. We're guardians, teachers, protectors." The assembly chamber erupted in a chorus of agreement in hundreds of languages. The Confederation was transforming. Species that had once feared human strength now sought to learn from human wisdom. The swarm, their great enemy, was becoming their greatest student in the arts of peace and protection. What happens now? a young Valkyrie delegate asked during the celebration that followed. Sarah looked out at the gathering. Humans, aliens, and former swarm drones all mingling, learning from each other, growing together. Now we do what humanity has always done best. We adapt. We protect. We help others survive. And we teach them that strength doesn't have to mean violence, Alina added. That being powerful doesn't mean being dangerous. That the greatest victory isn't defeating an enemy. It's turning them into friends. Sarah finished. As the celebration continued, news came in from across the galaxy. Former swarm worlds were requesting membership in the Confederation. Species that had hidden from the conflict were emerging, drawn by the promise of protection and understanding. The galaxy was changing, growing, adapting. And at its heart stood humanity. Not as warriors, not as conquerors, but as teachers and protectors. They had proved that coming from a death world didn't make them dangerous. It made them perfectly suited to help others survive and thrive. The legacy of Earth, once feared as a crucible of violence, was being rewritten. It was becoming known as the birthplace of the greatest protectors the galaxy had ever known, a species that had learned the ultimate lesson. True strength lies not in the ability to take life, but in the wisdom to preserve it. As Sarah watched the celebration, she thought of that first fearful meeting with the Valkyrie. "We're not a warrior people," she whispered, echoing those first words. "We're something far better. We're survivors who learned to help others survive. We're protectors who taught others to protect. And that's a legacy worth building."